The crack of gunfire split the silence of the moonlit prairie as Bethany Foster ducked behind the overturned stagecoach, heart hammering against her ribs. What had started as a routine journey to Williamsburg, Colorado had descended into chaos when masked bandits ambushed the stage just 10 miles short of her destination. The year was 1876, and the West was still as wild as the stories that traveled east. Stories Bethany had foolishly dismissed as exaggerations meant to dissuade proper Boston ladies from venturing into frontier territory. Hand over the strongbox. A gruff voice demanded from the driver, who lay wounded behind the coach wheel. Bethany clutched her reticule tighter, pressing herself against the splintered wood of the vehicle. The other passengers, an elderly couple and a traveling salesman, huddled nearby, terror evident in their wide eyes. The approaching footsteps of the bandits crunched on gravel, growing louder with each passing second. A sharp whistle pierced the night, followed by rapid hoofbeats. Gunshots rang out again, but this time they weren't aimed at the stagecoach. Through a gap in the coach's broken window, Bethany glimpsed a lone rider charging toward the scene, pistols blazing in both hands. "It's Nathan Zachary," one of the bandits shouted, panic lacing his voice. "The bounty hunter." The name meant nothing to Bethany, but the reaction it caused among the outlaws spoke volumes. They scrambled for their horses, abandoning their planned robbery. The lone rider pursued them, firing carefully placed shots that unseated two of the bandits. The others fled into the darkness of the prairie night. Silence settled once more, broken only by the nervous snorts of horses and the pained groaning of the wounded driver. Bethany peered over the edge of the stagecoach as the rider returned, holstering one pistol while keeping the other ready. He dismounted with fluid grace, approaching the overturned coach. In the silver moonlight, Bethany saw a tall man with broad shoulders, a battered Stetson pulled low over his eyes. A leather vest covered his chambray shirt and worn chaps protected his legs. Dust and trail grime coated his clothes, suggesting many days on the move. "Everyone all right?" he asked, his voice deep but gentle. The passengers began to emerge from their hiding places. Bethany stood on shaky legs, smoothing down her travel-worn skirt. "The driver's been shot," she said, finding her voice stronger than expected. The stranger nodded, moving to check on the wounded man. As he knelt beside the driver, Bethany noticed a long, fresh wound across his left arm, blood darkening his sleeve. "You're hurt," she said, stepping closer. He glanced at his arm dismissively. "It's nothing, just a graze." "Let me help," Bethany insisted, pulling a handkerchief from her reticule. "I have some medical training." A fleeting smile crossed his face, softening the hard lines around his eyes. "Much obliged, madam, but we should get the driver seen to first." Together they tended to the stagecoach driver, who had taken a bullet to the shoulder. Bethany used her petticoat for bandages, applying pressure to stanch the bleeding while the stranger examined the wound. "Ball went clean through," he observed. "He's lucky, we need to get him to town." "Can you ride for help?" asked the elderly gentleman who had introduced himself as Judge Thompson. The stranger hesitated, glancing toward Williamsburg's distant lights. "Better if I stay. Those bandits might circle back." He didn't elaborate, but Bethany sensed there was more to his reluctance than concern about the robbers. "I can drive the stage," the salesman volunteered. "If we can right it, that is." With coordinated effort, they managed to set the stagecoach upright. The horses, thankfully, had remained tethered to the hitching post where the driver had secured them when the attack began. As they prepared to depart, Bethany noticed the stranger examining the unconscious bandits he'd shot from their horses. He tied them efficiently, then loaded them onto their mounts. "What about you?" she asked as he finished securing the last outlaw. "I'll follow at a distance," he replied, not quite meeting her eyes. "Make sure you reach town safely." In the moonlight, Bethany caught sight of a weathered wanted poster that had fallen from one of the bandits' pockets. The wind threatened to carry it away, but she stepped on it quickly. Bending down to retrieve it, She froze when she saw the face illustrated on the paper and the name printed beneath it. Wanted. Nathan Zachary for murder and bank robbery, $1,000 reward, dead or alive. She looked up sharply. The stranger Nathan was watching her, his expression unreadable. "You're wanted," she said, the words barely above a whisper. His jaw tightened. "Not everything you read is true, madam." Before she could respond, Judge Thompson called out, "Miss Foster? We're ready to depart." Nathan took a step back, hand resting near his holster. "Your choice, Miss Foster." That poster would fetch a nice reward in Williamsburg. Bethany studied him for a long moment. This man had just saved them all from robbery or worse. The bleeding driver owed him his life, and something in those deep blue eyes told her the poster didn't tell the whole story. In one swift motion, she tore the wanted poster in half, then quarters, then eighths, letting the pieces scatter in the prairie wind. "I saw no poster," she said firmly. "Only a man who risked his life to save strangers." Relief flickered across Nathan's face, quickly masked by a neutral expression. "You're making a decision without knowing the facts." "Perhaps," Bethany acknowledged, "but I've always been a good judge of character." She hesitated, then added, "Will you truly follow us to Williamsburg?" "With that price on your head, I'll see you safely to the edge of town," he promised. "After that." He shrugged, wincing slightly as the movement pulled at his wounded arm. "That injury needs proper cleaning and bandaging," Bethany insisted. "My uncle's ranch is just outside Williamsburg. He's away on business, but I'm to manage the household until his return. No one would look for you there." Nathan shook his head. "I can't bring trouble to your door, Miss Foster." "Bethany," she corrected, "and the trouble would be my choice." She glanced toward the stagecoach where the other passengers were settled and waiting. "The Rocking F Ranch, 3 miles north of town. There's a line of 3 cottonwoods marking the turn from the main road." Nathan studied her for a long moment. "Why would you help a wanted man, Bethany Foster?" She met his gaze steadily. "Because sometimes justice and the law aren't the same thing. My father taught me that before he died." Something shifted in Nathan's expression, recognition, perhaps, or respect. He nodded once, then mounted his horse with that same fluid grace she'd noticed earlier. "3 cottonwoods," he repeated. "Now go before they start wondering what's keeping you." Bethany hurried to the stagecoach, climbing inside without looking back. As they started toward Williamsburg, she caught a glimpse of a lone rider silhouetted against the rising moon, following at a careful distance. She didn't know what had led to Nathan Zachary's name appearing on a wanted poster, but she intended to find out. And something told her that offering him sanctuary might be the most important decision she had ever made. The journey to Williamsburg took nearly 2 hours, the damaged stagecoach moving at a cautious pace. Bethany peered out the window periodically, sometimes catching a glimpse of their shadow protector trailing behind. Other times, Nathan disappeared completely, only to reappear on a different ridge or behind a different outcropping of rocks. As they approached the outskirts of town, Bethany saw him rein in his horse, watching from a distant hill as the stagecoach continued towards civilization. The lights of Williamsburg glowed warmly against the dark Colorado night, promising safety and comfort after their ordeal. The town had grown since Bethany had last visited 5 years earlier. What had once been little more than a trading post now boasted a proper main street with a hotel, several saloons, a bank, and various shops. Electric lights, a recent innovation, illuminated the central thoroughfare, though most side streets still relied on gas lamps. The stagecoach rolled to a stop outside the doctor's office, where the wounded driver was quickly attended to. Sheriff Daniel Mills arrived moments later, his weathered face creased with concern as he took statements from the passengers about the attempted robbery. "Sounds like you folks were mighty fortunate," the sheriff said when they'd finished their accounts. "You say a lone rider drove them off." Bethany kept her expression neutral. "He didn't give his name," she lied smoothly. "Just helped us and rode on." The sheriff looked skeptical but didn't press the matter. Well, I'll send a telegram to the next county. Maybe they can intercept these bandits before they cause more trouble. He tipped his hat to Bethany. Miss Foster, welcome back to Williamsburg. Your uncle mentioned you'd be arriving. Sorry it wasn't under better circumstances. Thank you, Sheriff. I'm eager to reach the ranch and clean up after my journey. Bethany gathered her belongings, anxious to be away from the sheriff's shrewd gaze. A ranch hand named Emmett had been sent to meet the stage and escort Bethany to her uncle's property. After loading her trunks onto the wagon, they set off through the quiet streets of Williamsburg and onto the North Road. Your uncle's mighty pleased you agreed to come help with the household, Emmett commented as they drove. Been in a state since Mrs. Holloway took ill and had to return east. Bethany nodded absently, her mind on the wounded man who might or might not be making his way to the ranch. Yes, Uncle Frank's letter sounded quite desperate. I was happy to oblige. Ranch has been doing well, Emmett continued. Though there's been some trouble with cattle rustling in these parts, your uncle increased security before he left for Denver. This caught Bethany's attention. What sort of security? Extra men patrolling the boundaries, new hands hired on. They're good fellows, though that new foreman's a bit overzealous if you ask me. New foreman, Mr. Caldwell, came with recommendations from some big outfit in Wyoming, runs a tight ship. Bethany filed this information away, wondering if Nathan's arrival might be complicated by these additional security measures. They traveled in companionable silence for a while, the wagon wheels creaking rhythmically over the rutted road. There they are, Emmett said eventually, pointing ahead. The 3 cottonwoods. The massive trees stood like sentinels marking the turnoff to the Rocking F Ranch. As they approached, Bethany thought she saw movement in the shadows beneath the trees, but when she looked more closely, there was nothing there. The ranch house came into view after another mile, a sprawling 2-story structure built of sturdy logs and stone. Warm light spilled from several windows, and smoke curled from the main chimney. Despite her concerns and the evening's earlier trauma, Bethany felt a surge of affection for the place. She had spent several happy summers here as a child, following her uncle around the property and learning about ranching. Home sweet home, Emmett announced as he pulled the wagon to a halt before the front porch. The door opened before Bethany could respond, revealing a stout woman with silver-streaked black hair pulled into a severe bun. Miss Foster, thank the Lord you've arrived safely, the woman exclaimed, hurrying down the steps. We heard there was trouble with the stage, Mrs. Garcia, Bethany greeted the housekeeper with genuine warmth. Yes, there was an incident, but everyone is safe now. Come inside, child, you must be exhausted. I've prepared your usual room and drawn a bath. Bethany allowed herself to be ushered into the house, knowing she needed to establish her presence before attempting to help Nathan. The ranch house was just as she remembered, rustic but comfortable, with well-crafted furniture and colorful woven rugs scattered across the polished wooden floors. After bathing and changing into a fresh dress, Bethany joined Mrs. Garcia in the kitchen for a late supper. The housekeeper filled her in on the ranch's operations and her uncle's itinerary in Denver, where he was negotiating a contract to supply beef to several military forts. He should return within 2 weeks, Mrs. Garcia explained, pouring Bethany a cup of tea. Until then, you're mistress of the house. And Mr. Caldwell manages the ranch operations. Indeed, efficient man if a bit. Mrs. Garcia searched for the right word. Rigid. The men respect him, though some miss your uncle's more personable approach. Bethany nodded thoughtfully. I should like to meet him tomorrow. He usually reports to the house after breakfast. Mrs. Garcia studied Bethany with shrewd eyes. Is everything all right, miss? You seem distracted. Just tired, Bethany assured her. It's been a trying day. Later, alone in her room, Bethany stood by the window gazing out at the moonlit ranch yard. Had Nathan found the turnoff? Was he lurking somewhere in the darkness, wounded and uncertain of his welcome? Or had he decided the risk was too great and continued on his way? She was about to turn away when she caught sight of a shadow detaching itself from the darkness near the barn. The figure moved with careful deliberation, keeping to the areas of deepest shadow, clearly avoiding the bunkhouse where the ranch hands slept. Bethany's heart quickened. She grabbed a shawl and made her way quietly downstairs, avoiding the steps that creaked. The house was silent, Mrs. Garcia having retired to her quarters in the rear wing, slipping out the side door. Bethany hurried across the yard toward the barn. The cool night air carried the scent of sage and distant pine, along with the familiar smells of livestock and hay. She reached the barn door and hesitated, suddenly aware of how foolish this midnight excursion might be. What if she was wrong? You shouldn't be out here alone at night, a low voice said from behind her. Bethany whirled around, a startled gasp escaping her lips. Nathan stood there, his tall frame half hidden in shadow, one hand resting on his holstered pistol. "You came," she whispered, "against my better judgment." His voice held a trace of wry humor despite its gravity. In the moonlight, Bethany could see that his condition had deteriorated. His face was pale beneath the trail dust, and he held himself stiffly, favoring his wounded arm. "You need medical attention," she said, reaching for his uninjured arm. "Come with me. There's a small storage room off the kitchen where you can rest tonight. No one will look for you there." Nathan hesitated. "I don't want to put you in danger." "You're about to collapse from blood loss and exhaustion," Bethany countered. "That would put me in far more danger than helping you now." After a moment's consideration, Nathan nodded. Bethany led him carefully across the yard, staying in the shadows. They entered through the side door and made their way to the storage room, a small but clean space normally used for preserves and extra supplies. "Wait here," Bethany instructed, lighting a small lamp. "I'll fetch what we need." She returned shortly with bandages, a basin of warm water, a bottle of whiskey, and some leftover supper. Nathan had removed his hat and gun belt, but remained standing as if ready to flee at the first sign of trouble. "Sit," Bethany said, nodding toward a wooden chair. "And remove that shirt so I can tend to your wound properly." A hint of amusement flickered in Nathan's tired eyes. "You're rather commanding for someone harboring a fugitive." "I'm a Boston woman," Bethany replied with a small smile. "We're known for taking charge in a crisis." Nathan unbuttoned his shirt and eased it off his injured arm with a barely suppressed groan. The wound was worse than Bethany had initially thought, a deep furrow across his upper arm where the bullet had carved a path through flesh. It had stopped bleeding but looked angry and inflamed. "This will hurt," she warned, pouring some whiskey onto a clean cloth. "Not my first bullet wound," Nathan said, then hissed through clenched teeth as she pressed the alcohol-soaked cloth against the injury. Bethany worked efficiently, cleaning the wound thoroughly before applying a salve from her uncle's medical supplies and wrapping it in clean bandages. Throughout the process, she was acutely aware of Nathan watching her, his blue eyes intent and thoughtful. "You've done this before," he observed. "My father was a doctor," she explained, securing the bandage. "He insisted I learn basic medical skills, said a woman should never be helpless in an emergency." Wise man. He was. Bethany busied herself putting away the medical supplies. "He died 2 years ago, pneumonia. I'm sorry." The simple sincerity in his voice made her look up. Their eyes met, and something passed between them, a recognition of shared loss, perhaps. Bethany cleared her throat and gestured to the plate of food. "You should eat, then rest. We can talk more in the morning." Nathan accepted the plate gratefully. "Thank you, Bethany. Not many would take such a risk for a stranger. Perhaps I'm just curious about why a man who risks his life to save others is wanted for murder," she replied, moving toward the door. "Sleep well, Mr. Zachary. Lock the door behind me." Back in her room, Bethany found sleep elusive. She kept replaying the events of the day: the robbery attempt, Nathan's timely intervention, the wanted poster with its stark accusation. Murder and bank robbery were serious charges, yet nothing about the man currently hidden in her uncle's storeroom suggested a cold-blooded killer. Morning arrived with a brilliant Colorado sunrise. Bethany dressed quickly in a practical blue skirt and white shirtwaist, pinning her chestnut hair into a simple knot at the nape of her neck. She needed to check on Nathan before the household fully awakened. She made her way downstairs to find Mrs. Garcia already busy in the kitchen, kneading dough for the day's bread. "Good morning, Miss Foster," the housekeeper greeted her. "You're up early. I hope you slept well despite yesterday's excitement." "Well enough, thank you," Bethany replied, trying to appear casual as she poured herself a cup of coffee. "I thought I might take inventory of the pantry and storeroom today. Uncle Frank mentioned in his letter that supplies might need replenishing." Mrs. Garcia nodded approvingly. "A good idea. I'll be happy to assist after breakfast is served." "No need," Bethany said quickly. "I'm sure you have enough to manage. Besides, it will help me reacquaint myself with the household." The housekeeper seemed about to protest when a knock at the back door interrupted them. A tall, lean man with iron gray hair and a neatly trimmed mustache entered without waiting for an invitation. "Mrs. Garcia will need extra provisions for the men heading to the north pasture today," he announced, then stopped short when he noticed Bethany. "Ah, you must be Miss Foster." "Welcome to the Rocking F. Garrett Caldwell, ranch foreman." He gave a stiff half-bow. "Mr. Caldwell," Bethany acknowledged. "I've heard good things about your management of my uncle's affairs." Caldwell's thin lips curved in what might have been a smile. "Just doing what I'm paid for, madam. Your uncle runs a fine operation. I'm merely maintaining his standards until he returns." There was something in his manner that set Bethany on edge, a coldness behind the professional courtesy. "I understand you've increased security due to rustling concerns," she said. "Indeed." Caldwell's eyes narrowed slightly. "Cattle theft is rampant in these parts. I've stationed men at key points around the property. No one comes or goes without our knowledge." Bethany felt a chill at his words but maintained her composure. A wise precaution. "I'm sure my uncle appreciates your diligence." "Just doing my job, madam." Caldwell accepted the list of provisions from Mrs. Garcia. "Will there be anything else?" "Not at present," Bethany replied. "Though I would appreciate a tour of the ranch operations when you have time." "Of course." "Perhaps tomorrow morning," Caldwell suggested. "Today I must oversee the moving of stock to fresh pasture. Tomorrow will be fine." After Caldwell departed, Bethany finished her coffee quickly. "I'll start on that inventory now," she told Mrs. Garcia. "Perhaps you could ensure we're not disturbed." "I find such tasks require concentration." The housekeeper looked mildly puzzled but nodded her agreement. "As you wish, Miss Foster." Bethany waited until Mrs. Garcia was occupied with breakfast preparations before slipping into the storeroom. She knocked softly, then used the key she'd procured from the kitchen drawer. Nathan was awake, sitting on the narrow cot she'd prepared for him the night before. He'd replaced his shirt but left it unbuttoned, revealing a strip of bandage visible beneath. Despite the circumstances, Bethany found herself momentarily distracted by the sight of his bare chest and the lean muscles of his abdomen. "Good morning," he said, quickly buttoning his shirt when he noticed her gaze. "I hope I haven't compromised your position here." "Not yet," Bethany replied, setting down the small basket of food she'd brought. "But the foreman just informed me that the ranch is under heavy surveillance due to rustling. No one comes or goes unnoticed, apparently." Nathan frowned. "That complicates matters, indeed." Bethany hesitated, then asked directly, "Why are you wanted, Mr. Zachary?" "I think I deserve to know the truth if I'm to continue sheltering you." Nathan's jaw tightened, but he nodded slowly. "Fair enough." He gestured to the single chair. "You might want to sit, it's not a short tale." Bethany settled into the chair, smoothing her skirt as she prepared to listen. "I was a deputy marshal in Wyoming," Nathan began, "assigned to investigate a series of bank robberies across 3 territories. The robberies followed a pattern: small banks in remote towns, hit during busy periods when cash reserves were highest. 3 guards killed in the process." "And you were accused of these crimes?" Bethany asked, trying to reconcile the man before her with such violent acts. "Not at first." I was closing in on the gang responsible when things went sideways. Nathan's expression darkened with the memory. I tracked them to a town called Sweetwater, was set to arrest the ringleader, a man named Victor Blackwell, when I was ambushed in my hotel room. Woke up with a splitting headache to find the local sheriff standing over me, Blackwell's body on the floor and my gun in his hand. You were framed, Bethany concluded, so it would seem, but the evidence was damning. My gun had been fired. Blackwell, who I'd never met face to face before, was dead, and a satchel of money from the latest robbery was found under my bed. What about your superiors? Surely they didn't believe you capable of such betrayal. Nathan's laugh held no humor. My direct superior, Marshal Howard, was conveniently unreachable. When they finally contacted him, he disavowed any knowledge of my investigation, claimed I'd been acting without authority, said I'd been suspended weeks earlier for erratic behavior. That's absurd, Bethany protested. It was a setup from the beginning, Nathan agreed. I managed to escape custody during transfer, been running ever since trying to piece together the truth. I believe Howard is involved with the gang, the real mastermind behind the robberies. Do you have proof, bits and pieces? Not enough for a court, but I'm getting closer. One of Blackwell's associates, a man named Reeves, was operating in these parts. I followed his trail to Colorado. Is that why you were near Williamsburg when our stagecoach was attacked? Nathan nodded. Those weren't random bandits. They're part of the same gang. I recognized one of them from a wanted circular. Bethany absorbed this information, her mind racing. So clearing your name depends on exposing this conspiracy, finding evidence that Marshal Howard is corrupt. And staying alive long enough to do it, Nathan added grimly. The price on my head ensures every bounty hunter and lawman in the territories is looking for me. Before Bethany could respond, they heard footsteps approaching the storeroom door. Nathan was on his feet instantly, hand reaching for the pistol he'd left on the cot. Miss Foster, Mrs. Garcia called. Are you in there? Yes, Mrs. Garcia, Bethany replied, moving to block the door. Just finishing the inventory, I'll be out shortly. Mr. Caldwell is asking to speak with you before he leaves for the north pasture. Bethany exchanged a glance with Nathan. I'll be right there. She waited until the housekeeper's footsteps retreated before turning back to Nathan. You need to stay hidden. I don't trust Caldwell. Something about him feels wrong. Nathan considered this. How long has he worked for your uncle? Only a few months, according to Mrs. Garcia. He came with recommendations from Wyoming. Wyoming, Nathan repeated, his expression sharpening. Do you know which outfit? No, but I can find out. Bethany gathered the basket she'd brought, now empty of food. I'll return when I can. As she reached for the door, Nathan caught her arm gently. Bethany, be careful. If Caldwell has connections to Blackwell's gang or to Howard, you could be in danger just by associating with me. The concern in his eyes touched her. I'm more careful than I look, Mr. Zachary. Nathan, he corrected. If you're going to risk your safety for me, you might as well use my given name. Bethany smiled. Nathan, then, rest and recover your strength. We'll figure this out together. In the days that followed, Bethany established a routine that allowed her to care for Nathan while maintaining her duties as temporary mistress of the Rocking F. She brought him food and fresh bandages, smuggling in books to help pass the time during his confinement. His wound was healing well, and color had returned to his face. Their conversations grew longer and more personal with each passing day. Nathan spoke of his childhood in Missouri, his years as a lawman, the principles his father, also a marshal, had instilled in him. Bethany shared stories of Boston society, her father's medical practice, her decision to remain unmarried despite numerous suitors. None of them seemed worth giving up my independence, she explained as they sat in the storeroom one afternoon, Nathan now able to move his injured arm with minimal discomfort. And yet here you are in Colorado, managing your uncle's household, Nathan observed. That's different. It's temporary and on my terms, Bethany smiled. Besides, I've always loved it here. The openness, the freedom. In Boston, there are so many rules about what a woman can and cannot do. You don't strike me as someone who pays much attention to those rules. Not when they're foolish, she agreed, but there are consequences to defying convention, like harboring a wanted man, precisely. Their eyes met, and Bethany felt a now familiar flutter in her chest. The attraction that had sparked between them that first night had grown stronger with each passing day. She knew it was impractical, perhaps even dangerous, to develop feelings for a man with a price on his head, yet she couldn't deny the connection forming between them. Nathan seemed to sense her thoughts. He looked away first, clearing his throat. "Have you learned anything more about Caldwell?" Bethany accepted the change of subject with mixed relief and disappointment. "He's from the Diamond T Ranch in Wyoming. Worked there for 3 years before coming to the Rocking F." "Diamond T," Nathan repeated thoughtfully. "That's near Sweetwater. Could be a coincidence or not," Bethany pointed out. "He's been asking questions about the stagecoach robbery. Seems particularly interested in the mysterious rider who drove off the bandits. He suspects I'm here." "I don't think so. Not yet anyway, but he's watchful." Bethany hesitated, then added, "I've noticed more men patrolling the ranch boundaries since my arrival. Far more than necessary for preventing cattle theft." Nathan's expression darkened. "They're looking for me, or for someone like me, someone who might have information about their operations." "You can't stay hidden in this storeroom indefinitely," Bethany said. "Sooner or later someone will discover you, I know." Nathan stood, pacing the small confines of the room. "I need to continue my investigation. Reeves is the key. If I can find him, persuade him to testify against Howard." "And how do you propose to do that while every lawman in Colorado is hunting you?" Nathan smiled grimly. "That's where being a fugitive has its advantages. I move in different circles now. Hear things most lawmen don't. You need to get into town," Bethany realized, "to gather information." "It would help, but the risk can be minimized," she interrupted. "I need to visit Williamsburg tomorrow for supplies. Mrs. Garcia has provided a list of items the general store doesn't stock. They'll be arriving on the eastbound train. You could accompany me as a ranch hand." "Caldwell knows all your uncle's men. He doesn't know the hands at the Parker place. They sometimes hire out when work is slow." Bethany smiled at Nathan's surprised expression. "I've been making inquiries of my own. My father always said information is the best medicine for uncertainty." "Your father sounds like a wise man." "He was." Bethany rose, smoothing her skirt. "Rest that arm. Tomorrow we'll see what Williamsburg has to tell us." Dawn broke clear and cool the following morning. Bethany had arranged for a small wagon rather than the formal buggy, explaining to Mrs. Garcia that she wanted to bring back larger supplies than the buggy would accommodate. She dressed in her simplest day dress, a sage green cotton with minimal embellishments, and a practical bonnet that shadowed her face. Nathan awaited her behind the barn, dressed in clothes she'd procured from the ranch's stores: a faded work shirt, denim trousers, and a wide-brimmed hat pulled low over his forehead. He'd trimmed his beard to a neat stubble, changing his appearance enough that a casual observer wouldn't connect him with the wanted posters. "You clean up well for a ranch hand," Bethany commented as she brought the wagon around. Nathan's mouth quirked in that half-smile she'd come to anticipate. "And you look far too elegant to be associating with the likes of me." "Appearances can be deceiving, Mr. Smith," she replied, using the alias they'd agreed upon. "That's a lesson Williamsburg is about to learn." The journey to town took just under an hour. They maintained a careful distance on the wagon seat, mindful of propriety and the risk of recognition. Yet Bethany was acutely aware of Nathan beside her, his steady hands on the reins, the subtle scent of leather and soap, the warmth of his presence in the cool morning air. Williamsburg was bustling when they arrived. Saturday was market day, and farmers from surrounding homesteads had brought produce and handcrafts to sell. The streets were crowded with wagons and pedestrians, providing excellent cover for a man who wished to avoid notice. "I'll meet you at the station at noon," Bethany said as Nathan helped her down from the wagon. "The train arrives at 12:15. Be careful. Always am." He tipped his hat and led the horses toward the livery where they would be cared for until departure. Bethany made her way to the general store first, where she presented Mrs. Garcia's list to the proprietor, Mr. Finch. While he gathered her order, she engaged his wife in conversation, carefully steering the topic toward recent events in town. "Dreadful business with the stagecoach robbery," Mrs. Finch clucked. "Sheriff says it's the third such incident in as many months, always the same description of the bandits." "Has anyone been apprehended?" Bethany inquired innocently. "Not yet, though there's talk of a gang operating out of the old Sullivan mine. Sheriff organized a posse last week, but they found nothing." Mrs. Finch leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Between us, my Henry thinks someone in town might be involved." Information about valuables on those coaches had to come from somewhere. This caught Bethany's interest. "That's a troubling thought. Has the sheriff investigated this possibility?" Mrs. Finch straightened, adjusting her spectacles. "Sheriff Mills is a good man, but perhaps a bit traditional in his methods, prefers chasing outlaws to questioning townsfolk." After completing her purchase, Bethany visited several other shops, continuing to gather information under the guise of casual conversation. By mid-morning, she had learned that a stranger matching Reeves' description had been seen in Williamsburg twice in recent weeks, each time meeting with someone at the Silver Dollar Saloon. The meetings were brief, the participants careful not to be observed together for long. As promised, Bethany arrived at the train station shortly before noon. The platform was crowded with travelers awaiting the eastbound train. She scanned the faces, looking for Nathan among them, but saw no sign of him. The train whistle sounded in the distance, announcing its approach. Still no Nathan. Bethany's anxiety grew. Had he been recognized, arrested? Or worse, the train pulled into the station with a great hiss of steam and screech of brakes. Passengers began disembarking as others prepared to board. Bethany checked the shipping office for her parcels, all the while watching for any sign of Nathan or trouble. "Looking for someone, Miss Foster?" Bethany turned to find Sheriff Mills standing beside her, thumbs hooked in his belt. "Sheriff," she acknowledged, fighting to keep her voice steady. "Just waiting for the supply shipment for the Rocking F. Came in on this train," Mills confirmed. "Station master has it set aside for you." His gaze swept the platform. "You come to town alone?" "One of the hands drove me in," Bethany replied truthfully. "He's seeing to some errands while I collect the supplies." The sheriff nodded, seemingly satisfied. "Heard about your adventure with the stagecoach. Nasty business. Lucky that rider came along when he did." "Very lucky," Bethany agreed cautiously. "Funny thing, though," Mills continued. "Got a telegram yesterday from the federal marshal's office. Seems a fugitive might be in these parts. Nathan Zachary, wanted for murder and robbery. Marshal mentioned he might have been involved in that stagecoach incident." Bethany maintained her composure with effort. "How terrible." "I didn't catch the name of our rescuer, but he certainly didn't behave like a murderer. Quite the opposite." "Appearances can be deceiving, Miss Foster." The sheriff studied her with shrewd eyes. "If you see or hear anything suspicious out at the ranch, you let me know right away." "This Zachary is considered dangerous." "Of course, Sheriff. I'll be vigilant." Mills tipped his hat and moved away, leaving Bethany to collect her parcels with trembling hands. The telegram from the marshal's office couldn't be coincidence. Someone had connected Nathan to the stagecoach incident and directed attention to Williamsburg. The net was tightening. She was arranging the last of the packages in the wagon when Nathan appeared beside her, his expression grim. "We need to leave," he said in a low voice, taking the parcel from her hands. "Now." "What happened?" Bethany asked as he helped her onto the wagon seat. Nathan climbed up beside her and took the reins. "Reeves is dead, found behind the Silver Dollar with his throat cut." "Must have happened last night," Bethany gasped. "Nathan, the sheriff, just told me they received a telegram about you from the marshal's office." His hands tightened on the reins. "Howard, he knows I'm close." They drove out of Williamsburg in tense silence, both scanning the road ahead and behind for signs of pursuit. Only when the town had disappeared from view did Nathan speak again. "Reeves was my best lead, without his testimony." "There must be another way to prove your innocence," Bethany insisted. Nathan's expression was bleak. "I'm running out of options, Bethany, and now I've put you in danger too." "I chose to help you," she reminded him, "and I don't regret it." He glanced at her, his eyes softening momentarily. "You should. Associating with me could cost you everything." "Some things are worth the risk," Bethany said quietly. They had just reached the 3 cottonwoods marking the turnoff to the Rocking F when Nathan suddenly pulled the wagon to a halt, his body tensing. "Riders," he said, nodding toward a dust cloud in the distance. "Coming from the direction of the ranch." Bethany shaded her eyes, trying to make out details. "Could be ranch hands." "Could be," Nathan agreed, but his hand moved to rest on his concealed pistol. "But I don't like coincidences." The riders approached rapidly, 4 men on horseback, moving with purpose. As they drew closer, Bethany recognized Caldwell at the lead, his face set in grim lines. "Miss Foster," the foreman called as they neared. "There you are, we've been concerned." "No need for concern, Mr. Caldwell," Bethany replied with forced lightness. "Just collecting supplies as planned." Caldwell's gaze shifted to Nathan, eyes narrowing. "And who might this be?" Before Bethany could respond, Nathan answered in a drawl quite different from his normal speech. "Name's Smith, sir. Hired on at the Parker place last month. Miss Foster was kind enough to offer me a day's work helping with supplies." Caldwell studied Nathan intently. "Smith, is it? Don't recall seeing you around these parts before." "Just passing through originally. Needed work." Nathan met the foreman's gaze steadily. After a tense moment, Caldwell nodded. "Well, we'll take it from here, Smith. Miss Foster is safely back on Rocking F land now." "I'd prefer Mr. Smith accompany us to the house," Bethany interjected. "The parcels are heavy and he's been most helpful." A flash of annoyance crossed Caldwell's face. "As you wish, Miss Foster, but we have plenty of hands to assist with unloading." The group proceeded to the ranch house, an uncomfortable silence hanging over them. Bethany felt Caldwell's suspicious gaze repeatedly returning to Nathan, who maintained his role as the simple ranch hand with remarkable composure. At the house, Nathan helped unload the supplies onto the porch while Caldwell dismissed the other riders. "That will be all, Smith," the foreman said when the task was complete. "I'll have one of our boys drive you back to the Parker place." "That won't be necessary," Nathan replied, touching his hat brim. "I can walk from here, it's not far across the north pasture." "Nonsense," Caldwell insisted. "Rocking F takes care of its own, and those who help its own." The subtle emphasis on his words raised Bethany's suspicions further. Caldwell was testing them, watching for reactions that might confirm his doubts. "At least let me pay you for your trouble," Bethany said, reaching for her reticule. "And perhaps Mrs. Garcia could provide a meal before your journey." "Much obliged, madam," Nathan said with a touch of his hat. "A meal would be welcome." "In the kitchen, Mrs." Garcia served a simple lunch while Bethany explained their delay in town, carefully omitting any mention of Reeves or the sheriff's warning. Nathan ate quietly, maintaining his character as the taciturn ranch hand. Caldwell remained hovering nearby, his presence a constant reminder of the danger. When the meal concluded, he personally escorted Smith to the wagon that would take him back to the Parker ranch. "Safe travels," the foreman said, his voice pleasant but his eyes cold. "Perhaps we'll see you again sometime." Nathan nodded. "Perhaps so, sir. Thank you for the hospitality." Bethany watched from the porch as the wagon departed, her heart heavy with worry. Nathan had no intention of going to the Parker ranch, of course. They had agreed he would circle back after dark, returning to his hiding place in the storeroom until they could formulate a new plan. But as the wagon disappeared from view, Bethany couldn't shake the feeling that things had shifted irrevocably. Caldwell was suspicious, the sheriff was on alert, and Nathan's best lead for clearing his name was dead. Time was running out. That evening, after the household had retired, Bethany made her way cautiously to the storeroom. Nathan had returned safely as planned, but his expression was grave as he shared what he had learned in Williamsburg. Reeves was killed between midnight and dawn, he explained. But not where he was found. The blood patterns were wrong. Someone wanted his body discovered. A warning to others, Bethany suggested, possibly, or a message to me. Nathan ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in the gesture. I spoke with a man who saw Reeves at the Silver Dollar yesterday evening. He wasn't alone. Who was he with? Description matches Caldwell. Nathan's eyes met hers. Your uncle's foreman is connected to all this, Bethany. I'm certain of it now. Bethany sank into the chair, her suspicions confirmed. What do we do? I need to search his quarters, find evidence of his connection to Howard. That's too dangerous, Bethany protested. He's already suspicious of Smith if he catches you. It's my only option left. Reeves is dead, the other gang members have scattered, and Howard will have every lawman in Colorado looking for me after that telegram to Sheriff Mills. Bethany considered the situation. Caldwell keeps his personal belongings in the small cabin near the bunkhouse. He stays there when not out with the men, but he's always armed, Nathan. So am I. Nathan's hand rested briefly on his holster. I don't intend to confront him, just find evidence if it exists. When? Tonight. No sense waiting. He studied her face. You should maintain your distance from now on, Bethany, if things go wrong. Don't, she interrupted. I'm involved now, whether you like it or not. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Stubborn woman. Practical woman, Bethany corrected. You need someone who knows the ranch layout. Someone who can create a diversion if necessary. After further discussion, they formulated a plan. Bethany would invite Caldwell to the main house for a discussion about ranch operations, something that wouldn't seem unusual given her role as acting mistress. While the foreman was occupied, Nathan would search his cabin for evidence linking him to Howard or the robberies. Be careful, Bethany said as she prepared to leave the storeroom. Caldwell is no fool. Neither am I, Nathan replied. He caught her hand as she turned to go, his fingers warm against hers. Thank you, Bethany, for everything. The simple touch sent a current of awareness through her. Don't thank me yet. We still need to clear your name. His blue eyes held hers. Regardless of what happens, meeting you has been unexpected, in the best possible way. Before Bethany could respond, he released her hand. The moment passed, but the sensation of his touch lingered as she made her way back to her room. The following day proceeded according to plan. Bethany sent word to Caldwell requesting his presence at the house that evening to discuss the upcoming cattle drive. The foreman accepted with his usual efficiency, arriving precisely at the appointed time. Mr. Caldwell, Bethany greeted him in the study, where she had arranged papers on her uncle's desk to suggest serious business matters. Thank you for coming. I hope I haven't disrupted your evening routine. Not at all, Miss Foster. Caldwell removed his hat, revealing neatly combed iron-gray hair. Always at your service. For the next hour, Bethany kept the foreman engaged in detailed discussion about ranch operations, cattle prices, and the logistics of the upcoming drive. She asked numerous questions, feigning greater ignorance than she actually possessed to prolong the conversation. Caldwell answered with precision, occasionally revealing surprise at her interest in the business aspects of ranching. Most ladies prefer to leave such matters to the men, he observed at one point. Bethany smiled pleasantly. My father believed in educating his daughter in practical matters as well as social graces. I find business quite fascinating. Your uncle mentioned you were unconventional, Caldwell said, a hint of disapproval in his tone. I'll take that as a compliment, Bethany replied. Now, about those grazing rights on the eastern section. As the clock struck 9, Bethany began to worry. Nathan should have completed his search by now. Was he having difficulty? Had something gone wrong? Her answer came in the form of a commotion outside, shouting voices and running footsteps. Caldwell was on his feet instantly, hand moving to the pistol at his hip. Stay here, Miss Foster. he ordered, moving toward the window. The study door burst open before he reached it. 2 ranch hands stood there, breathing hard. "Mr. Caldwell, there's an intruder on the property," one reported. "Jenkins spotted him near your cabin." The foreman's face hardened. "Did you see him clearly?" "No, sir. Just a shadow moving away from your place." Jenkins fired a warning shot, but he disappeared into the darkness. Caldwell turned to Bethany, suspicion evident in his gaze. "Strange coincidence, Miss Foster, an intruder at my cabin while you keep me occupied here." Bethany rose from her chair, maintaining a calm she didn't feel. "Are you implying something, Mr. Caldwell?" "Not implying, Miss Foster, observing." His hand remained on his pistol. "I think it's time we had an honest conversation about your guest." Before Bethany could respond, more shouts erupted outside, followed by gunfire. Caldwell moved to the window, pulling aside the curtain. "They've cornered someone by the north corral," he said, a note of satisfaction in his voice. "Excuse me, Miss Foster, I have an intruder to deal with." He strode from the room, the ranch hands following. Bethany hurried to the window, peering out into the darkness. Lanterns bobbed in the distance as men converged on the corral area. More shots rang out, and her heart clenched with fear for Nathan. Making a swift decision, Bethany grabbed her shawl and slipped out the side door. She moved through the shadows, avoiding the men with lanterns, circling around to approach the corral from the opposite direction. As she drew closer, she could hear voices shouting commands, the frightened whinnies of horses disturbed by the commotion, and the sharp reports of occasional gunfire. Through gaps in the corral fence, she glimpsed figures moving ranch hands with rifles, approaching cautiously. "He's behind the feed trough," someone called. "Surround him." Bethany pressed herself against the barn wall, searching desperately for any sign of Nathan. Had he been hit, captured? Was there any way she could help without revealing her involvement? A hand suddenly covered her mouth, stifling her startled cry. She was pulled backward into the deeper shadows behind the barn. "It's me," Nathan whispered against her ear, releasing his hand from her mouth but keeping a protective arm around her. "Are you all right?" Bethany turned in his embrace, relief washing over her. "Thank God, I thought they'd caught you." "Not yet," he replied grimly. "But they will if we don't move. They're searching systematically." "What happened? Did you find anything?" Nathan nodded, patting his vest pocket. "Letters. From Howard to Caldwell. Planning the robberies, splitting the proceeds, mention of framing me when I got too close." "That's proof of your innocence," Bethany exclaimed in a hushed voice. "If I can get it to the right people. Caldwell won't let that happen if he can help it." More shouts came from the direction of the corral, closer now. The search was expanding. "We need to leave," Nathan said urgently. "They'll search the entire ranch, including the house. You can't be found with me, Bethany." "Where will you go?" "Williamsburg." "Sheriff Mills may be traditional, as you put it, but he's honest. With these letters and your testimony." Bethany shook her head. "Caldwell has men watching the roads. You'll never make it to town." "I have to try." Nathan's hand gently cupped her cheek. "You've risked enough for me." The tenderness of the gesture made Bethany's heart race. "We'll go together. My uncle kept horses in the old line shack beyond the east pasture. No one uses it now, if we can reach it unseen." A lantern beam swept past them, illuminating the ground mere feet from where they stood. They pressed deeper into the shadows, Nathan's body shielding Bethany from view. For several tense moments, they remained motionless as a ranch hand passed by, rifle in hand. When the searcher had moved on, Nathan whispered, "Lead the way. Stay low and move only when I signal." Together they crept from shadow to shadow, avoiding the searching men. The night air was cool, carrying the scent of sage and distant rain. Bethany led Nathan along a dry creek bed, providing cover as they made their way toward the eastern boundary of the ranch. They had nearly reached the old fence line when a shout went up behind them. There, by the creek, a rifle shot cracked through the night, splintering bark on a tree just above their heads. "Run," Nathan urged, drawing his pistol. He fired a shot in the direction of their pursuers, not aiming to hit but to slow the chase. They sprinted across the open ground, Bethany's skirts hampering her movements. Nathan stayed close, helping her over rough patches, both of them breathing hard as they pushed toward the distant line shack. More shots followed, but the darkness and distance made accurate aim impossible. They reached the tree line beyond the pasture and plunged into the relative safety of the shadows. "Not far now," Bethany gasped, pointing ahead where a dark structure loomed against the night sky. The line shack was small and weathered, built years ago when the ranch boundaries were different. 2 horses were indeed inside, left there with basic supplies for ranch hands working the distant pastures. Nathan quickly checked the animals while Bethany gathered what provisions she could find: jerky, hardtack, a canteen of water. Within minutes, they had saddled the horses and were ready to depart. "Which way to Williamsburg from here?" Nathan asked as they mounted. "Northwest," Bethany replied, adjusting her skirts over the saddle. "But they'll expect that. We should head east first, then circle around." Nathan nodded approval. "You've got good instincts for someone raised in Boston drawing rooms. I told you I've always loved the West." She managed a smile despite their dire circumstances. Even its more adventurous aspects. They rode hard through the night, avoiding the main trails, keeping to terrain that would hide their tracks. The moon emerged from behind clouds occasionally, providing just enough light to navigate by. Behind them, they could hear distant shouts and see the bobbing lanterns of their pursuers, but the distance gradually increased. Dawn found them in a small hollow beside a creek, some 15 miles from the rocking F. They allowed the horses to drink and rest while keeping watch for signs of pursuit. "We should reach Williamsburg by midday if we continue at this pace," Bethany said, smoothing her rumpled skirt. She had abandoned her shawl during their flight, and her hair had come loose from its pins, falling in chestnut waves down her back. Nathan couldn't help but notice how the morning light gilded those waves with gold, how it softened the determined set of her jaw into something almost vulnerable. Despite their desperate situation, or perhaps because of it, he found himself drawn to her more powerfully than ever. "You should return to the ranch," he said, forcing practicality to override emotion. "Claim I kidnapped you. It would protect your reputation, your standing in the community." Bethany's eyes flashed. "Absolutely not. I've come this far, Nathan Zachary. I'm seeing it through to the end. It could be dangerous. Caldwell won't surrender easily, even with the evidence we have. I'm not afraid." She moved closer, her gaze steady on his. "Not of Caldwell, not of scandal, not of anything except living a life where I never stand for what I believe in. And I believe in you, Nathan." The simple declaration stripped away Nathan's remaining defenses. He reached for her, one hand gently cradling the back of her neck as he drew her to him. Their lips met in a kiss that began tentatively but quickly deepened with the intensity of emotions too long restrained. Bethany's arms wound around his neck, her body pressing against his as the kiss continued. When they finally parted, both were breathing unsteadily. "I shouldn't have done that," Nathan murmured, though he made no move to release her from his embrace. "I would have been very disappointed if you hadn't," Bethany replied, a smile curving her lips. Nathan rested his forehead against hers. "If we survive this, if my name is cleared." "When," Bethany corrected firmly, "when your name is cleared," he smiled at her certainty. "When my name is cleared, we should discuss this connection between us more thoroughly." "I look forward to it." Bethany reluctantly stepped back from his embrace. "But first, we have a corrupt marshal to expose and your freedom to secure." They continued their journey toward Williamsburg, keeping to less traveled routes. As they rode, they discussed how best to approach Sheriff Mills with the evidence. The letters Nathan had found detailed not only Howard's involvement in the bank robberies, but also the deliberate framing of Nathan when he came too close to discovering the truth. "Howard's signature is on these," Nathan explained. "Along with details only the mastermind of the robberies would know. Dates, amounts, locations for future jobs. And Caldwell's role, coordinator for this territory, recruiting men, selecting targets, arranging for disposal of the stolen money. Bethany frowned. How did my uncle come to hire such a man? Recommendations can be falsified, Nathan pointed out. Or your uncle's reputation for running a profitable ranch made him a target, a good cover for Caldwell's real activities. They were within 5 miles of Williamsburg when they heard riders approaching from behind. Nathan led them into a stand of trees where they watched as 6 men galloped past Caldwell at their head, rifle across his saddle. Heading for town, Nathan observed grimly, to intercept us. They don't know which direction we took, Bethany reminded him. They're guessing. A good guess. We need to change our approach. After careful consideration, they decided to circle around to the south, entering Williamsburg from the opposite direction than expected. It would take longer but might allow them to reach Sheriff Mills before Caldwell could prevent it. The sun was high overhead when they finally approached the outskirts of town. They left the horses concealed in a grove of trees and proceeded on foot, keeping to alleys and side streets. Bethany's disheveled appearance drew curious looks from the few townsfolk they encountered, but no one challenged them directly. The sheriff's office was located on the main street, directly across from the Silver Dollar Saloon. From their vantage point in an alley, Bethany and Nathan could see Caldwell and 2 of his men standing on the boardwalk outside the sheriff's office. He's blocking our access, Bethany whispered. There's a back entrance, Nathan replied, used for bringing prisoners in discreetly. If we can reach it. They circled behind the buildings, moving cautiously through back lots and service areas until they reached the rear of the sheriff's office. The door was locked, but a window nearby stood slightly open. Wait here, Nathan instructed, boosting himself up to peer through the window. After a moment's observation, he eased the window open further and slipped inside. Bethany waited anxiously, watching the alley for any sign of Caldwell's men. Minutes passed like hours until finally the back door opened, and Nathan gestured for her to enter quickly. Inside, Sheriff Mills sat behind his desk, his weathered face grave as he examined the letters Nathan had spread before him. A deputy stood nearby, hand resting on his holstered pistol, watching Nathan with obvious suspicion. Miss Foster, the sheriff acknowledged as Bethany entered. Mr. Zachary here claims you can verify his story. I can, Sheriff, Bethany confirmed, moving to stand beside Nathan. Everything he's told you is true. Caldwell is working with Marshal Howard. They framed Nathan for murder and robbery. Mills tapped the letters with one finger. These are serious accusations against a federal marshal if they're false. They're genuine, Nathan insisted. Compare Howard's signature with official documents. Check the details against the robbery reports. Everything matches. The sheriff studied them both for a long moment. And you say Caldwell and his men are outside my office right now? Yes, Bethany confirmed. They've been pursuing us since last night when Nathan discovered these letters in Caldwell's cabin. Mills exchanged glances with his deputy. Charlie, fetch Judge Thompson. He's staying at the hotel. Do it quietly, mind. Use the back way. The deputy nodded and slipped out the rear door. Mills rose from his desk, moving to peer through the front window. Caldwell told me you'd kidnapped Miss Foster, he said to Nathan. Claimed you were desperate and dangerous, wanted me to organize a posse. And yet you're listening to us, Bethany observed. Mills turned back to them. I've been sheriff in Williamsburg for 18 years, Miss Foster. Learned to trust my instincts, and something about Caldwell never sat right with me. He gestured to the letters. Besides, no desperate fugitive walks voluntarily into a sheriff's office with evidence like this. Relief washed over Bethany. Then you believe us. Let's say I'm willing to investigate, Mills replied cautiously, but this needs to be handled carefully. If Howard is corrupt as you claim, he has considerable power and connections. What do you suggest? Nathan asked. Judge Thompson arrives tomorrow for circuit court. He has jurisdiction to issue warrants even for federal officers, if these letters convince him. The rear door opened again, and the deputy returned with Judge Thompson, the same elderly gentleman who had been on the stagecoach during the attempted robbery. "Sheriff," the judge greeted Mills. Then his eyebrows rose as he recognized the others. "Miss Foster." "And our mysterious rescuer, I presume." Bethany stepped forward. "Judge Thompson, this is Nathan Zachary. He needs your help." The judge listened intently as Nathan explained the situation, examining the letters with careful attention. His expression grew increasingly grave. "I've known Marshal Howard for many years," he said finally. "Always considered him an honorable man, but these letters—" He shook his head. "The evidence is compelling." "Will you help us?" Bethany asked. "Justice must be served regardless of personal feelings," Thompson declared. "I'll issue warrants for both Howard and Caldwell." A commotion from the front of the building interrupted them raised voices, the sound of boots on the boardwalk. "Sheriff Mills," Caldwell called. "We need to talk." Mills motioned for Nathan and Bethany to stay back, away from the windows. "Judge, perhaps you could greet our visitor. Your presence might temper his approach." Judge Thompson nodded, straightening his coat before moving to the front door with Mills. From their position, Nathan and Bethany could hear the conversation that followed. "Judge Thompson," Caldwell acknowledged, surprise evident in his tone. "I didn't realize you were in town." "Arrived early for tomorrow's court session," the judge replied smoothly. "What brings you to the sheriff's office in such a state, Mr. Caldwell?" "A fugitive, Your Honor, Nathan Zachary." "He's kidnapped Frank Foster's niece from the Rocking F. We've been tracking them since last night." "A serious accusation," the judge observed. "Do you have evidence of this kidnapping?" "Miss Foster was taken against her will," Caldwell insisted. "My men and I witnessed it." "Curious," Thompson mused. "Sheriff Mills has just been taking Miss Foster's statement, and she tells quite a different story." A heavy silence followed this revelation. "Then Miss Foster is here now, indeed," Mills confirmed. "Along with some very interesting documentation concerning you and Marshal Howard." The tension was palpable even from the back room. Nathan's hand moved to his pistol, and Bethany stepped closer to him instinctively. "I don't know what lies Zachary has told you," Caldwell said, his voice hardening, "but he's wanted for murder and robbery. I have orders from Marshal Howard himself to apprehend him by any means necessary." "Yes, we're aware of those charges," the judge replied calmly. "Most troubling. Almost as troubling as your correspondence with the marshal regarding bank robberies and the framing of Deputy Zachary." Another silence, longer this time. Then the unmistakable sound of a gun being drawn. "I'll be leaving now," Caldwell announced, all pretense abandoned. "My men have this building surrounded. Anyone tries to stop me, Miss Foster will be the first to regret it." "That would be unwise," Mills warned. "Very unwise." What happened next occurred in a blur of motion and sound. A gunshot shattered the tense standoff, followed by shouts and the pounding of boots. Nathan pushed Bethany behind him protectively as the deputy drew his weapon. More gunfire erupted from the street. Caldwell's men engaging with townspeople who had been drawn by the commotion. Through it all, Bethany could hear Judge Thompson shouting for order, demanding an end to the violence. The shooting stopped as suddenly as it had begun. An eerie silence descended, broken only by a pained groan from the front office. "Nathan," Bethany clutched his arm. "What's happening?" Before he could answer, Sheriff Mills appeared in the doorway. "It's over," he announced grimly. Caldwell drew on the judge. "I had no choice." "Is the judge all right?" Bethany asked anxiously. "Shaken but unharmed," Mills assured her. Caldwell missed. "I didn't." Nathan relaxed his protective stance slightly. "And his men," surrendered once they saw their leader fall. "They're being disarmed now." Mills looked at Nathan with newfound respect. "You took quite a risk coming here, Zachary." "I'm tired of running from false charges," Nathan replied simply. The aftermath unfolded with surprising speed. Judge Thompson issued the warrants as promised, sending telegrams to the territorial governor and the federal authorities in Washington explaining the situation. Sheriff Mills locked the surviving members of Caldwell's gang in his jail cells and organized a group of trusted men to watch for any attempt by Howard to intervene. Word spread quickly through Williamsburg. By evening, a crowd had gathered outside the sheriff's office, not the angry mob Nathan had feared, but citizens curious to see the man who had been falsely accused and now stood vindicated. Bethany remained by Nathan's side throughout, her quiet strength a constant support as statements were taken and evidence catalogued. Her own testimony regarding the events at the Rocking F proved crucial in establishing the timeline of Caldwell's activities. What happens now? She asked as they sat in the sheriff's back office that evening, finally alone for a moment. Nathan took her hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. The judge believes the federal authorities will send investigators within the week. Howard will be arrested and my name will be officially cleared. And after that, Bethany's voice held a question beyond the immediate future. After that, Nathan's blue eyes met hers, no longer guarded. After that, I was thinking I might settle somewhere, put down roots. If I found the right reason to stay in one place. Bethany's heart quickened at his meaning. Any particular place in mind? I've grown rather fond of Colorado, he admitted with a smile. Particularly a certain ranch with 3 cottonwoods marking the turnoff. My uncle could use a new foreman, Bethany suggested, returning his smile. Someone honest, someone who understands the law and how to enforce it fairly. And what about the foreman's personal life? Nathan asked softly. Would there be possibilities there as well? Bethany leaned forward, pressing her lips gently to his. I believe there would be excellent possibilities, Mr. Zachary. Excellent indeed. 3 months later, the Rocking F Ranch hosted a gathering unlike any it had seen before. Lanterns hung from the cottonwoods at the entrance, guiding guests up the drive to where tables had been set beneath an open-sided tent. Musicians played lively tunes as townsfolk from Williamsburg mingled with ranchers from surrounding properties. At the center of it all stood Bethany Foster and Nathan Zachary, she in a gown of ivory satin, he in a new black suit with a silver brocade vest. Judge Thompson had just pronounced them husband and wife, and the celebration was in full swing. Mrs. Zachary, Nathan murmured as they moved together in their first dance as a married couple. How does it sound? Perfect, Bethany replied, her eyes shining with happiness. Though I'm not sure Boston society would approve of my marrying a former fugitive. Former being the operative word, Nathan reminded her with a grin. Fully pardoned by the governor himself after Howard's confession. It had taken 6 weeks for the full investigation to conclude, but the result had been complete exoneration for Nathan. Howard, facing overwhelming evidence of his crimes, had admitted to orchestrating the bank robberies and framing Nathan when the young deputy had come too close to exposing the operation. The former marshal now awaited trial in a federal prison. Uncle Frank certainly approves, Bethany noted, glancing toward where her uncle stood chatting with Sheriff Mills. Frank Foster had returned from Denver to find his niece at the center of what had become the biggest scandal in Williamsburg's history. After his initial shock, he had embraced the situation with surprising enthusiasm, offering Nathan the position of foreman and his blessing for the marriage. Your uncle is a wise man, Nathan said. He recognizes quality when he sees it, Bethany laughed. Are you referring to yourself or to me? Both of us, Nathan replied, pulling her closer as the music slowed. Together. As the sunset painted the Colorado sky in hues of gold and crimson, Nathan led Bethany away from the celebration to a quiet spot beneath the 3 cottonwoods. There, with only the evening stars as witnesses, he kissed her with all the passion and tenderness that had grown between them since that fateful night on the stage road. I never expected to find you, he whispered against her lips. A Boston lady with the courage of a frontier woman and the heart of a romantic. And I never expected a wanted man to steal my heart, Bethany replied, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. But here we are. "Here we are," Nathan agreed, gathering her close once more. "Home at last." The Rocking F Ranch prospered in the years that followed. Under Nathan's management, it expanded its operations and became known throughout Colorado for its fair dealings and quality stock. Bethany established a small school for the children of ranch hands and nearby homesteaders, putting her education to use in a way that brought her deep satisfaction. Their first child, a son they named William Frank Zachary, arrived a year after their wedding, followed 2 years later by a daughter, Catherine. The family grew along with the ranch, their home filled with laughter and love. Sometimes, on clear evenings, Nathan and Bethany would sit on the porch of the ranch house, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains. They would recall the desperate flight from the ranch, the confrontation in the sheriff's office, and the long journey to justice that had brought them together. "Do you ever regret it?" Nathan asked on one such evening as they celebrated their 10th anniversary. "Getting involved with a fugitive?" Risking everything on the word of a stranger, Bethany's answer was the same as it had been every time he asked. She took his hand, pressing it to her heart, her eyes reflecting the same certainty they had shown that day in Sheriff Mill's office. "Not for a single moment," she said. "Some chances are worth taking. You were the best chance I ever took." And as the stars appeared one by one above the Colorado plains, Nathan Zachary, no longer a wanted man but a husband, father, and respected rancher, knew that his long journey had led him precisely where he was meant to be. Home, with the woman who had believed in him when the rest of the world had not.